You are listening to The Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. Join him as he and his guests discover how businesses thrive in California.
Well, welcome to The Pilgrim on the 405. This morning, we're going to have a great conversation with Bridget Venus Grimes from San Diego, who's written a wonderful book for women called Corner Office Choices, The Executive Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom. So Bridget, tell us about your experience and what caused you to write this book and dedicate your life to this particular part of financial planning.
Sure. Well, thanks, Will, for having me on. This book actually was something I started to write a number of years ago, and then I shelved it. And then when I came back to it again, it was because I felt like the time was right. I have found after serving women for so many years, and this is primarily accomplished women executives, that over and over again, the same four issues came up that were torpedoing these women from living a decent quality of life. And so I thought, the time had come for me to put out there not only to women execs to take some action themselves, but also to my peers in financial planning who are not dealing with the issues that are unique to women in business. And they are getting nowhere. And there's all this focus on, let's say for retirement, but there's a million pitfalls along the way before you can even get to that place. So it really was kind of out of exasperation where I thought, man, once again, another woman would walk in my office and it was the same issues. And if they only knew some of these steps to take, they would be in a financially better place.
So what are those four things?
So the first thing is not knowing what your goals are, which may seem pretty basic, but I can't tell you how few people have sat down and actually thought about what their goals in life are. So it's personal goals, financial goals, professional goals, and really thinking through what is important to them. Because at the end of the day, the jobs that we have are really just the tools to live the life we want. So that's the first, I call them derailers. The first of the derailers is not knowing what your goals are. The second one, which is frankly the biggest one, is not knowing where your money goes. And we call that cash flow management. So it doesn't matter how much money you make. What I find is that most people don't know where it goes. And they make choices that if they knew where their money was actually going, they may choose to spend it differently. They may choose to put it toward things that are more important to them. But overwhelmingly, they have no idea where the money's going. So that's a big one. The next one is just not having a strategy around your career or your business. So a lot of the folks I work with are business owners, and others are just highly compensated employees. But since this job of theirs, is really the tool for quality of life and compensation, you have to have a strategy around that. You have to have a plan around that tool. And I found that more often than not with women, they are so busy. They're just focused on the here and now in that business. And many of my clients have families they take care of when they leave the office. A lot of my clients have a spouse who doesn't work or is not the primary breadwinner in the family. So these women have so much on their plates that they do not take time to figure out what's next in that career or how do they generate more revenue in their business. There is no time. So it's a big impediment. And then the last of the derailers is not having a written plan of action. So I just consider ideas and thinking about this and where you would like to go is just a wish until you actually put down action steps and really commit to them.
It doesn't sound like this is limited to women.
It's not. Good point.
So why do you think people don't do these things?
Well, I think in the case of women professionals, I'd say the first thing is time. So I think that they are really, really busy. And I think that's a big issue. I would think too, people have strange relationships with money. Everybody brings a different relationship with money to this. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear and embarrassment around where they may be financially right now. That's a really big and interesting issue. And as you know, in my industry, there is a whole presence now on the emotions behind money and they call it behavioral finance, to try to get to the root of why people act and think the way they do around money. Because it gets in the way. It gets in the way of where they would really like to be. And I would say that one of the issues that I encounter is that folks should have come in sooner. But they are hesitant to because they are embarrassed, because they don't have as much saved as they think that they're supposed to have, or the assets or the lifestyle. There's a tremendous amount of embarrassment and anxiety. So, and I address that in the book because the way I look at it is there is no judgment. You know, you don't know what anybody else's financial situation is. And more often than not, it is not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it seems to me that very often talking about money brings up anxiety. Somebody's talking about money, they're either bragging about it or they're complaining about it. There's a lot of emotions there.
There is. And I think that that's partly cultural. I think in our culture, you don't talk about money. I don't know why that is. You know, I didn't grow up in a family where we talked about money. I knew my father worked real hard and my mom took care of the family, and, you know, they did the best they could, but no one ever talked about it. I had no idea how we were financially. I just know that, you know, my mom would save money. We'd go on vacations once a year and she babysat kids so that we had money for that. And, you know, we just lived a normal life, but you never knew the real financial situation. You never talked to the kids about it. So I think part of it is really cultural. I also think we have a crazy consumer-driven society. Mm. And, you know, I mean, I'm in Southern California. You and I are in Southern California. And it is really common to drive down the street with pretty fancy cars and fancy houses. And people want you to see this excess. It's apparently it's proof of their success. And I think people really struggle with that. They feel that that's what they are supposed to have, what their life's supposed to look like to be successful. And if they don't have that, they're not successful. So they're going to take whatever means they need to have that stuff, even if it means going into debt.
Right. Well, you know, I never really knew what my father made. The only hint that I had was at one point I looked over his shoulder while he was writing out his monthly check to the church. And I knew he gave 10%. Mm-hmm. And that was the only real awareness that I had of anything about his income. And when I went off to college, I didn't realize that, and I only found out much later, that at that point in his business career, he and his brother owned an auto parts store. They were almost bankrupt in the business. But I didn't know that. It was amazing that the wall, the secrecy, or I don't know if it was secret, but it was just that we didn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I think that that's just our culture. Like, we don't talk about it. And so people make assumptions. And the assumptions aren't healthy because the assumptions are not based on anything. So this is one of the issues I find with a lot of women. And I think, like you said, it's not gender specific. I'm sure that it's men too. It's men too. Where I come from is there are very specific financial risks that women have and women in business have. And until financial planning addresses that, it makes it hard for these women to be financially independent.
So talk about those.
Sure. So some basic statistics are women live longer than men, right? So longevity is a blessing and it's a curse, right? And if the average woman needs her retirement to last 30 years, her retirement portfolio, that's a lot of money. And the challenge women have is that the average woman professional works 12 fewer years than male, because they take themselves out of the market to raise children. They tend to be the ones who help aging parents. And over that loss of work time, it's lost income, it's lost savings, it's lost investment returns, and it's not helpful. We know that women have higher healthcare costs as they age. Women wind up single later in life, much more than men. And our costs don't halve. Just because you get divorced or you're widowed doesn't mean that all of a sudden your costs are halved. They're actually significantly more. So there's a lot of financial risks. And I would say one of the biggest ones is all around our pay for our work. Women don't get paid what they deserve, and that's true. That's just the way it is. And depending on your industry, it could be really bad. My industry, so finance, the average woman makes 59 cents to the $1 for a guy for exactly the same role. That is, as of April, study last April, 2018.
That's in financial planning?
That's in financial services.
Uh-huh.
Yes, it is. And I couldn't believe it because I speak on this all the time, and it turns out my industry is the worst one. Right? How ironic. But, there are tons of other industries that actually have the same issue. Most industries have the same issue where women are not paid on parity to men for the same work, right? This is the same job. So these are important things to know, because when a woman wants to be financially independent, financially secure, we have to have a plan around these issues.
All of these things seem to be in the way of, they allow the derailing to happen. What do you do to help people get back on the rails? So I approach this where this is the lay of the land. I want to make sure that all women, working women, know these are the pitfalls that exist. This is our world. So understand this, and then let's come up with a solution, right? Not everybody's going to have the same issues, but those are the issues we have to plan around for most women. And so we start by saying, okay, well, what is it that you really want out of this life in the first place? Why are you working so hard in that job? What's the purpose of this? And what would you really like your life to look like? So we provide them with a worksheet that's really meant to prompt them about what's important to them and dig into the goals. So, for example, maybe someone wants to pay for college for a child. So we'd say, okay, that's great, but what does that really look like? Is that 4 years of a private university, 4 years of a public university? Do you want to pay 100% for this child's education? Do you want the kid to be on their own? Really dig into every single goal. When is this going to happen? Who's going to pay for this? And have a really good idea of exactly what they want and what's it going to take to fund that goal, to make that goal happen. And we go through everything that's important to that person, and we ask them to spend time on that. And that's the beginning of everything we do, because success to everyone is very different. For some folks, it might be, hey, I want to make X because that's important to me, and that salary is important for my self-worth. It may be, hey, you know what? I would really like to stop work at 60, but I want that to be my choice. And I want to continue to work, but I want to do something completely different. So it's really prompting them in the very beginning to spend time around what's important to them and their life. And then we start to dig in to the numbers. And this is not the most sexy fun part, but this is the necessary part, because we want to see where somebody is right now. If they were to do nothing differently, would they be able to reach those goals they just shared? And if not, what are the gaps that we see? And then what are the solutions that we find? So we start to collect a whole bunch of documents, and we essentially start with building somebody's balance sheet. So that's their assets, every asset they have, and all the debt or the liabilities they have. And that's really a snapshot in time of somebody's health, somebody's financial health right now. And there's zero judgment. It could be a negative. We don't care, because assets minus liabilities is net worth. And I look at this as a starting point for everyone. And my goal is to help that person increase that number.
And it also gives me a really good idea of, okay, what are we looking at? Is there a lot of debt that we have to have a plan around? Have they done a good job of savings, or do we need to really work on that? How have they been saving? So we start with numbers like their net worth, their financial health, and then we dig into where they're spending their money. And I actually love this part because I see the most progress in budgets of anything I do with clients. And it's really eye-opening. So I always ask someone to fill out this basic spreadsheet of where do you think your money's going every month, your fixed expenses and your discretionary money. So everything else other than fixed. And just write it down where you think it is. And invariably, there's this huge surplus of money.
Right.
And I say, oh, that's awesome. So you have an extra $100,000 a year. So does that sound right to you? And they say, oh man, no, I mean, I can barely cover my bills. So, so then we start tracking their expenses. And I have software we use, and we link all the accounts they use to buy things. And we track expenses for a couple months. And and no judgment, no change to any activity, but we get a really good idea of where they spend their money. And then we tell them at the end of the month, here's where it went. We're going to do it a couple months. And then by the third month, we say, okay, now you're going to need to make some different choices. This is your life, as near as we can see. You told us that some of these other things were really important to you. We're going to need to carve money out of this. What are you willing to do? Where are you willing to cut? And I have folks making $1 million a year, and we have the same conversation with them as we do with folks making $100,000 a year. So it really comes down to choice, and I can empower them to choose. I show them the numbers. The choices are theirs.
Well, do you find that lots of people do not believe that they create the world that they're going to inhabit?
Well, I would tell you that a lot of people have a really misguided view of what they think that world is.
Well, I mean, what I'm wondering is, are there significant numbers of people who don't believe they can really accomplish their goals, that they can actually make things happen, or are they simply saying it happens to me?
Oh, responsibility for their actions.
Yes.
So I would say that most of my clients believe that they are responsible for their actions and where they are right now. I would say that's true. They did this to themselves. Mm-hmm. And they truly do believe that if they take different actions, they can change that future. However, that's easier said than done because spending patterns are years in the making. Mm-hmm. And your thought about society and culture and how you need to show up is not something that we can change overnight. And I would tell you that I have several clients, and we have been working on this budget cash flow piece for years. We are incrementally making progress, mm-hmm. but there are great issues with certain people in changing their spending habits to their detriment.
Well, I can't imagine not having that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't tell you when I get a phone call, oh yeah, we just got a new car. It was not an inexpensive car. We just wrote a check for this new car, and that was money that should have gone somewhere else.
Right.
And they didn't need a new Tesla. It should have gone somewhere else, but it was something that they felt they needed to have right then.
Yeah.
And these are the same people who can't get a business loan because their credit score is too low.
Wow.
So, some folks, it just takes a little longer, but we keep going. So the cash flow piece is really, really huge because finding the money that folks earn or choosing to put it where it will actually get them to goals that are important to them, that is breaking spending habits. That's training you to act differently. So I do hold them accountable, mm-hmm. and I do stay in front of them, and I try to make it as easy as possible with software that they can just log into and see where they are at any time. And it's just, for some folks, it's super overnight. It's great. They can do it. Other folks, we really need to work on this.
Well, if someone's basically using their debit card to pay for everything, can they just use something like Quicken to get that knowledge?
I suppose they could. There are quite a few apps that I recommend in the book that they could use as well. And some people work better with spreadsheets. I have some folks who love an Excel spreadsheet. I personally use an Excel spreadsheet for my family. It's old fashioned, but there's this act of actually writing down the numbers is very powerful. So I like that, but I also would recommend to a lot of folks to use apps that you can put on your phone and you link your accounts, like your debit card or whatever you're using, your Amex, whatever card you use to live on, and track it, but keep it where it's really easy to access so you can see where you are at any time.
What ones do you recommend?
So there's one called YNAB, YNAB. You Need a Budget, which is a good one. There is a great blogger called J Money, and J Money has some spreadsheets that you can get on his site, and they're terrific. I've used software that individuals can't use because it's financial planning software that does tracking. So, but those are my favorites. You can use some other new ones. Mint is out there, and I know a lot of folks use Mint. My challenge with Mint and some others is that they're free, and free doesn't mean free. Free means that somebody has access to your information and will try to sell you stuff. So I would say go with an app that actually is going to cost you maybe $5 a month or something, but they're not going to sell your data.
Well, now let me ask. I'm always very interested. Part of my business is helping people get in touch with their organization to get what they want from their business. And very often that's a 10, 25-year goal. And when they get there, very often that has a financial impact. They're getting more money. Now, I believe that when companies are succeeding, that means that there's more money for taxes, which has an impact on the social structure. There's more money for the whole company, all the employees. I mean, it's a different, when the success is there, it's a different mentality. In doing that, do you find that people are willing to give away a portion of what they are making?
Oh, that's such a personal thing. My clients are all pretty young. They're all in the thick of life, and they are working really hard. And so I would say that in most cases for my clients, we don't have a specific beneficiary outside of their own family that they're focused on right now. When I have folks who have appreciated assets and we need to find a way to lower their taxable income, oftentimes that's a good time for them to think about, okay, what are they charitably inclined and where would that go? But for the most part with my clients, I think that they would say that their biggest charity was their family.
And yet what you're helping them to see is that they are initially they're spending a lot of money that they're not even paying attention to.
For sure. Yeah. So the object is to make the spending more meaningful, whatever that is. So maybe that is paying for college for their children. And that's an important thing because the children are important to them, but not everybody has enough money to do that if you're choosing to spend it in some crazy way. So my goal is to bring them back in. Okay, what is it that you really want? What would you really like to fund? What do you want this life to look like? And how are we going to use the money that you earn differently to get there?
And so it all begins with that whole notion of your goals, getting clear about where you want to be, what you want, and then after you're clear about where you want to be, then the next question would be, well, how are we going to get there?
Yes, absolutely. So that's where when we were talking just a little bit before about the money, about the data we start to collect. So we really want a good picture of where you are on everything. How much have you saved for retirement? And because my clients are all working, they're contributing to their retirement plans at work, 401ks or whatever defined benefit plans they have. So we try to get a good sense of where are they in terms of being able to save for retirement. And do we have to make changes to how they've been saving for this? So oftentimes they're going to have to make really hard decisions. And, a call I had with a client this week was one of these conversations where, she's working very hard. She's a recently married woman for the second time. She's got adult children, and, her new spouse has he doesn't make nearly as much as she does, and has different spending patterns, different relationship with money. And so since they've been married, some of their expenses have gone totally off the rails. And so, our call the other day was, okay, let me bring you back into where you should be. Let me help you remember why you're going to cut expenses in this place, because this other goal over here,
right,
this is important to you.
And should where you should be in order to get what you want.
Yes.
Right?
She knows it, right? She knows it because we talk about this every few months, and I check in and see how it. So she knows it, and I think that's the collaborative piece that I really love about my work, where we come together with a plan of action for everybody, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, and then we start to chip away at it. So because these women are so busy, we have to prioritize what happens first. It can't all happen right now, and we know that it's going to happen over time. So we tick away incrementally at the important things, and we'll just check in. And I'll get an email from her, and she'll say, okay, I blew it, but there's next month. And that's okay. This is life. And my job is to just remind her about why she's doing this. What's the purpose of this? Because if you do take these steps, you're going to be able to buy this house. You're going to be able to move and take this different job that's important to you. You're going to be able to really change your lifestyle so it's what you want it to be. So I remind them, hey, this is what's really important to you that you shared with me. Let's just try to keep focused.
Yeah. And now it seems to me that given the way that we collect taxes, which is every year, that's an accounting, right? Mm. Everybody's forced into that kind of accounting. It's a judgment. I mean, here's the add it all up, push the button. Here's what happened last year.
Yes.
And it seems to me that is a very short-sighted way to plan.
So we do take planning into account with respect to taxes, for sure, right? But the taxes don't drive the planning. So, and I say that, there's only so many ways where you can limit taxes these days, right? And, for many of my high earners, we go first to mortgage interest deduction for house. So that's helpful. Obviously retirement plans are incredibly helpful in lowering taxable income. So that's great. So we try to take advantage of whatever opportunities there are to lower taxes or defer taxes. But at the end of the day, the goal is to really bring in the compensation that these folks need to live the life they want. And if that means that they're going to make more money and have to pay more taxes, that's the way it works, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, but what to me, this kind of forced 1 year accountability puts a short term on what it seems to me should be a much longer plan. When somebody can call up and say, I blew it this month or this quarter, if we got a 25-year plan, that's only 1%. That one quarter is only 1% of where we're going.
That's absolutely right. And I think, so that's why we sit down and we do a review at least, twice a year, if not more frequently. But, well, you bring up a really good point with the taxes. Yeah. So the taxes are once a year, and it keeps people focused on this short-term thing. But I would say to you, that's just one more check-in along the way, right? It is. And I know, when you think about your business revenue and your expenses, I actually love it that, you're forced to sit down every year and say, okay, how did we do? And
right.
Where can I change it moving forward?
Right.
You run your P&L and you run your expenses and you say, okay, where did I go awry? Or, hey, what could I do differently this year? So I like it. I think it's forced timing to really take stock of where you are.
But it's not the Super Bowl. That's one of the games, right?
Absolutely. It's one in the game of life, right? And
right.
So if this was a year where things were not great, maybe your income took a hit or who knows what went wrong. So you just say, okay, so that's how that worked out. And next year I'm going to make some changes so that next year is different.
Well,
right?
And not just next year.
Well, right, absolutely, down the road.
Because next year is going to be one of the years in my 10, 15, 25-year plan.
Yes. Absolutely. So I have a client, a relatively new client, who we engaged to work, and shortly after that, she found out that she was let go from her job. And so this isn't good. It's a single woman, divorced mom. And so we went into, total focus on new job mode. And, one of the things I go through when I take on a new client is taxes, tax returns. And I go through their past tax returns, and I take a look and just make sure that they're maximizing all the opportunities they can to lower taxes. Now, I am not a CPA, but I will reach out to the CPA and say, hey, help me understand some of these things. And interestingly enough, so this woman, we are now totally focused on cash flow. And we worked out the numbers, and we said, okay, based on how expensive your life is, you need to earn X. When you're out there interviewing, this is your baseline.
Right.
But one of the things we noticed when we went through her tax return is that she gets these really hefty returns. And I said to her, so is there a reason for this? Why do you get so much back at the end of the year when you could use this for cash flow? And she said, honestly, I have no idea why that is.
It's called change this number right here.
Yeah. And I said, well, we're going to change this. So at your next job, because you need the money to live. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we could increase your retirement? You have this money. We can use it differently based on the goals that you're sharing. So I think, like you said, the taxes, they're like this blip on the path, but I think they're a really awesome opportunity to change how you're moving forward.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like when the NFL team loses a game, that's not a blip. That's a big thing, but they're not going to let that get to them because they're aimed at the Super Bowl.
Yes, they are. And I think it's a really good way to look at tax returns. And, when I look at a couple years of returns, and you can see how income increases, ideally, it's like these folks are making great progress. It's exciting.
Yeah. All right. So let's suppose someone listens to this and says, those things make sense to me. What should they be doing?
Well, at the very first, I would absolutely suggest that people sit down and think about what's important to them personally, professionally, and financially. Where are they right now, and where would they really like to be? And this is about what's the quality of life that you want to live? What's success mean to you? How do you measure that? And spend some time around that, because nothing that we do could be done without knowing what those goals are. You can't have a plan if you don't know what you're planning for. And, one of the things we didn't even mention so far is the investment piece, which is usually what people think of when they think of financial planning. And I look at that as the very last thing we ever do, because how do you know how to invest if you don't know what you're investing for? And that comes, that goes for your retirement account. How do you know how best, what investments to choose, how best to allocate that and diversify that 401k? If you haven't thought about, when do I need this money? How comfortable am I with volatility and risk? And ask yourself these questions that are driven by the goals at the very beginning. So I would say spend some time and really think through in detail out, and then prioritize what's most important to you, knowing that you're going to have to make choices and you probably can't have everything right now. And then I would say, go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's good.
Then I would say spend time getting a picture of where you are right now. Write down all your assets, write down your debts, get a really good handle on your net worth, because that's what we're going to try to increase over time. Have you ever read the book Millionaire Next Door?
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed.
Awesome book. I can't say enough about this book. And this book really focuses a lot on how the millionaires in this country, when they did this study, they had a lot of things in common. And one was that they actually knew where their money went. These folks, and some of them are not who you would know were rich, and that's hence the title of the book. But these are people who really knew and took stock of where they spent their money, and they spent it thoughtfully. And not enough folks do that. So I would say definitely know where your money's going. You should know how much your fixed expenses are every month, every year. And you should know where your discretionary money is, because you get to choose where that money's spent. Do you want to choose to spend it on something that's really important to you, or do you want to just blow it and then, not get any closer to what is really important? So those two, cash flow is absolutely critical. And then I would absolutely say, once you've identified what your goals are and you've really got a strategy around your career, and you know that you're having the right conversations in business or in your job to get you where you want to be, to get the compensation you want, then I would say write down what you're going to do. And I'm a huge fan of this one-page document. And I have templates in my book of everything we've talked about, from cash flow to goals worksheet to the balance sheet. But I would really say keep it concise. And I write down for folks, here's what I said I wanted to accomplish. Here's where I am. Here are the gaps that we've identified. And here are the steps I'm willing to take. One page, it's not a 56-page, financial plan no one's going to look at. And you can reference this during the month. And you can incrementally tick off the steps to get you where you want to be. And it will truly make a difference.
Right. Well, now, I had an opportunity yesterday talking with a good friend of mine about things that we've been talking about. One of the things he shared with me was a document. It was like a 2-page document called Just in Case. Have you ever heard of that kind of document?
I haven't. Is it sort of a emergency, folks? Yes.
And he had everything from the passwords to his computer to where the life insurance was. Everything was very carefully laid out. Do you ever find people who have something like that?
So, no, I like that. I have, and my clients have a client portal, and we have a vault. And in that vault, we save all of these important documents. So I've got their trust accounts, documents in there, pretty much everything we've ever done for financial planning. But I like this idea. I do not have it in such a nice, organized, concise place where there's passwords and that sort of thing. I think it sounds awesome.
I'll share with you because he's going to share with me he's a CPA. I mean, he's a detail guy. And he's going to share it with me, and I'm going to have to put it together. I want to put it together because that's the kind of thing that I think will help my wife be much more comfortable.
I like it. Yes,
she knows all of these pieces, and they're all in one place. Mm-hmm. And then, by the way, he also said, and this is the songs that I once sung at my funeral. But it's all that kind of, here it is. It's even more than a vault or a safe deposit box. I mean, that'd be the place to keep things.
Right.
But this is all of those pieces that if something were to happen, that you need to know.
I like it. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Right.
Clients would like it too. No, it's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we will share that. Now, one last question for you. You work with a lot of women. Tell me about women and financial planners. I mean, we've talked about that majority of financial planners are men. What's the difference? Is that important for women to pay attention to that?
So there's been a lot of studies around this. I'll just say that. And really women don't exhibit any gender preference for an advisor unless they are widowed or divorced. And that's where women have shown that they actually prefer to have a woman as a planner. I don't think that gender matters, to be honest. I'm a woman serving women like me, and that's really why I even launched my business in the first place. When I got divorced and I found that there was nobody who served women like me, who were breadwinners, who had a million things on their plate, who had no time to think of their own financial security. That's really the impetus to me launching this firm. I would just say that gender doesn't matter. What does matter is having a planner who is aware of the financial challenges women have and who plans for those, because that is sorely missing in financial planning.
Well, how do men who are financial planners get that knowledge?
Well, they could read the book.
Okay.
Because it's really designed to help fellow planners do this work better.
Okay.
There's a ton of information out there. There are so many articles and studies that I have read over time that really highlight the challenges that women have that really need to be planned for. absolutely need to be planned for. So the information is out there. People just have to look for it.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been wonderful, Bridget. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Will.
Is there anything that you want to say to people who are finding this something they haven't thought about before?
So I would say to them, if they wanted to get some more information for themselves, pick up the book, because I wrote it to be a valuable and not boring tool. I would say if they'd ever want to reach out for any thoughts from me, they're more than welcome to do that. My goal is to make a difference to people, and I cannot help every woman out there, but the book can reach far more people than I could. And, I'd like to help whoever I possibly can. Absolutely love making a difference to people. But I would really say to folks listening, think about your own financial future and what's important to you. And if you take the right steps, you can truly live whatever life you want. I absolutely believe it's within your power. It just comes down to the choices that you make.
If they wanted to talk with you, how would they get in touch with you?
Sure. They could take a look at our website, which is WealthChoice.com, and there's contact information on there. And just give us a call or send an email, and I'd be happy to talk to them.
At WealthChoice.com.
Correct.
Wonderful. Great talking with you. I really appreciate your assistance for people who are looking to figure out where they want to go and how they're going to get there.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, this has been another wonderful time with one of the very valuable people we have in Southern California who are helping businesses thrive.
You've been listening to The Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. To hear more of the programs in this podcast, go to www.willchrist.com.